And this is episode 54 of the Inventive Marketing Club. We're here every Friday morning so we can build a better marketing strategy together. Hello, Claire. How are you doing?
Hi, Ben. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Very well. The sun has come out. I looked at the weather app this morning and it's sun for the next week, I think. I'm very happy. It makes me very happy to know that I'm going to go out in the sun. Except it's a bit windy around here, so that might disappoint me a little bit. You can see, I think people know my mood goes up and down with the weather. Although I'm quite hardy, but I just like sun. I just like sun. Anyway, looking very nice. I'm not going to chit chat too much, despite talking about weather, because we've got a presentation on how to build a marketing dashboard in Data Studio. And I really thought it'd be quite interesting to talk about why that might be useful, about how sort of consolidating that data into one place is useful because you can just track it all in one place. Makes it so much easier to manage your marketing. Right, I've got a few things up here, doing a bit of screen sharing, bit of keynote presentation. So let's get on and give you a bit of a background on dashboards in general. So as I said, we're going to be talking about building a marketing dashboard in Data Studio and about why it's important to bring everything into one place. So before we dive into that, what makes a good dashboard? I've seen a lot of dashboards in my time, and by dashboard, what I mean is like a dashboard of a car. It's having all the key bits of information in one place at a glance so that you can make decisions quickly. But I've seen a lot of dashboards and they tend to be full of a lot of data, a lot of numbers, a lot of tables, graphs. They look mostly kind of pretty, but often take a lot of time to think about. And for me, that's a bad dashboard. You don't want a dashboard where when you look at it, you are having to work hard to figure out what's going on with those numbers. It should be reasonably self-explanatory. And I really find that a good dashboard should just show me the numbers I need to make a decision on something. Perhaps ones I can impact in some way. You know, I can do something that's going to make that number go up or down. Ones that are going to prompt questions. Oh, why is that number higher than it was last month? Maybe you're expecting it to be even or be going up, be going down. Maybe when you see a graph, and graphs are really useful, you can recognize by the shape of it that something's wrong. And you know that if you're not getting irregular spikes or it's not going up in a consistent way, there's a problem. So I think dashboards should be simple and they should have meaningful numbers. Now, what do I mean by meaningful numbers? Well, for me, I mean, these are a few things that I like to see on a dashboard. Traffic sources. So where are people coming from when they come to our website? And I will caveat all of this by saying, I do look at stats from YouTube. I do look at stats occasionally from other social networks that we use and other places where we put our media. But I'm really interested in how people interact with us on the website, because that's where I feel that if we've brought them from YouTube or social media onto our website, they are interested in the business, and the marketing is doing its job, bringing them to the company. So that's why I'm interested in traffic sources, because I want to know which of those traffic sources, whether it's YouTube, maybe search, if someone's typing into a keyword into Google, or a social network, which of those traffic sources bring in the most visitors, bring in the right visitors, bring in the best ones who convert. We're also running an ad campaign for our Inventive Marketing Club at the moment. So I'd be interested in that as well. How much traffic is that coming in and how many people are signing up, or what pages they're looking at when after they've clicked on the ad. So traffic sources for me is incredibly important. Then obviously the number of goals. So I want to know how many sales, signups, subscriptions, downloads that we've got, whatever it might be. I mean, there are certain things that you'll want to measure that are very specific to your business. But for me, it's the number of goals, and that's going to be, for our club, how many people sign up. Now, the next one is an interesting number, and it's something that you can't really impact on a day-to-day basis, but it's a good number to look at and see if you can reduce over time, and that's site bounce rate. What I want is when people come in from search or they come in from social media is to land on a piece of content that they find interesting enough that they're going to take another click and go onto another page. And so they're not going to bounce back again. So while it's not something which is necessarily going to directly affect our conversions, it is something which I'd like to see come down over time. So measuring the site bounce rate, or how many people visit the site, our website, and only stay for one page. And that's usually a percentage. Keyword ranking position. So this is something that is useful to track, and it can be more relevant to certain businesses than others. For us, it's quite tricky because while I can track certain keywords we might want to be found for, there's a lot of competition in those broad keywords. So I tend to look for more longer tail keywords, longer phrases, more blog post style titles. But certain companies, there are specific keywords where if they can get more visits coming through to their website on those keywords, then they are going to get more sales off the back of that. So tracking where you are on Google, what position you are on Google, is a good indicator of whether you're doing well in your optimization and going to get more people coming through. Because the higher up you are, the lower down you are in your ranking, the better. And then finally, if you are doing any advertising, especially through Google Ads, but it could be through another, advertising on a social platform, what is the cost per ad conversion? So how much are you spending on advertising to get someone to convert, to get someone to hit a goal, get someone to subscribe, download, or buy? It's important to know that, because once you know that figure, you can play with it. You can actually then put more money into your advertising and hopefully get more people coming through on the other end. And it's always the tricky part of starting off an ad campaign is to say, well, how much money do I need to put into the ad campaign? Do I need to lose before I can start seeing meaningful people coming through and actually transacting, actually doing what I hope that they will do, which is to buy, subscribe. Once you know that, once you know the cost per acquisition, then you can just increase it. You can say, well, I know how many people I want to come through, so therefore I'll multiply that up by whatever the cost per acquisition is, and that's my budget. So there are a few numbers that are really useful. You might have different numbers for you. These are the meaningful ones for me. But I think it's important when you're creating a dashboard is to focus on the important numbers only. Don't fill your dashboard with lots of information. Try and make it as information, I was going to say dense, that's the wrong word. I'll say rich. So try and put as much information in, but without it taking you too long to scan and understand what's going on. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So these are two, I can't remember what they're called, scorecards in Data Studio. And I'm just showing the one on the left is the default scorecard that if you were to create a new scorecard in Data Studio, it's going to show you a metric. It's going to show you the label of the data, which is visitors. In fact, actually, it's users by default. It comes through as users on the on Data Studio, and then it's going to give you a number. So we've got 70,183 users have come through. Now that's an okay number, but looking at that number, it takes me a few seconds to quickly see how big that is, because it's such a big number that it's going to take me a little while to just process that in my brain. So what I prefer to do is actually shorten those numbers. I can't remember the specific term. We'll see when I do a walkthrough of Data Studio. But you can actually shorten the numbers. And so in this case, I've put it to 70.2K. So now I can see a bit more clearly a smaller number. It's easier for my brain to deal with and to see that metric increase over time, because maybe our visitors are always in the tens of thousands. So I don't really care about the hundreds. I just need to see the thousands. So I need to see, have we gone up from 69 to 70? Well, that's a big leap. Also, adding on to this is comparative data. So you can see down the bottom underneath the 70.2K, it says 5.6%, and it's got an arrow with an up sign, an arrow going up. What this means is, compared to the previous data we are looking at, that's gone up by 5.6%. What this saves you doing, let's say you're getting this data every single month. what it saves you doing is having to look back at the previous month's data to work out whether it's actually gone up. You can just look at this current month's data and you can see, well, I know how many visits we've got this month, and I know that it's increased. So it saves you time. You don't have to spend a lot of time looking back at previous data. So that's clearly better. Here's another example. When you want to compare data and have multiple things together to give you an idea of whether you've got any correlation between, in this case, visitors or users coming through on a website and the goals that you're getting. So we can see in this data, the first graph at the top is just a line which is plotting how many visitors you get each month. So we can see that the line sort of trundles along, then it moves up, and then because we're partway through a month, it's just showing what you've currently got in June, which is much lower. Now that's fine, that's useful. I can see that broadly speaking, visitors in this data are trending upwards. So that's good. That's a nice way of looking at it. Over time, over the year, we can see things are trending up. But maybe I can add on a bit more data. Maybe I can look at the trend. I can look at, well, is this better than last year? So in the graph below, there is a paler orange line that sits with the visitor data. And you can see that broadly speaking, we are up. Certainly in this data, May last year was lower than May this year. So this year, in May, we're getting more visits than we did comparing it to last year. So that's useful. You know, if we want to look at year-on-year data, this is very handy. Also added onto this graph is we've plotted out goals. So it's the number of, in this is dummy data from analytics. So I'm not actually sure what these goals represent, but let's say they are purchases. And we can see the dark blue are this year and the lighter blue are the previous year or the previous period that we're monitoring. And so we can see that goals are up too, except for June, because we're only partway through June. So it's only showing the goals we've got so far. So again, this graph, which doesn't take up a huge amount of space, shows you two different types of data, and it compares both those bits of data to last year. And that's pretty awesome. It means if you were to have this on a report and you get this every month, you can see how you're doing over the year, how you're doing compared to last year, and do the number of visits correlate to the number of sales or transactions you're getting? I mean, that's quite useful as well. Because again, if you know that, then you can say, well, I need to get more visits then. I mean, generally speaking, I feel that that correlation works across all websites, but it's not always the case. It might also be good to see, when am I getting the goals? Maybe I get lots of traffic throughout the year, but perhaps I'm a retail site and most of my business actually comes from Christmas. Something else I want to show you, this is just a little video intro, and it comes from Bath Digital Festival in 2019. I was interviewing Natalie. I actually can't remember the company she works for now, but she was working for a rental agency. I was interviewing Natalie in this particular section, and it was all about an activity we did together with Natalie and Al. Actually, he was with us, and we did an activity where we were trying to come up with the best KPIs for our business. And we use Natalie's business as an example. And the reason I'm showing you this is one of the key concepts the speaker was telling us about as part of the workshop was not to think about having data that you can't impact on your dashboard. Try to have data where you can actually do something to increase or decrease it, which is quite an interesting concept, because often people will look at a dashboard or look at a report that is data that has already happened and that they can't do anything about. So, for example, if they want more revenue, they can certainly look at the number of customers that they've got, but they can't just increase the number of customers. There's a big chain of events that they need to do to get more customers that are going to get them more sales and bring their revenue up. So what he was saying to do is try to find KPIs or key performance indicators or just numbers on your dashboard that when you look at it, you can go, I can make that go up. It's quite tricky to think about, but really interesting concept. And I'm not expecting you to necessarily be able to do this with a lot of the data you get from Google Analytics, but it does help put it into context of maybe helping to choose what data you want to pick and put on the screen. I'll give you one example that we came up with, which I think is relevant. You can see on the screen here, it says number 1, activity. So that was our metric, that was our KPI. And this is going to be something like looking at the amount of effort, and it could be time, it could also be money that you put into sales activity, telesales, pay-per-click, search optimization, that sort of stuff. And anything where someone is doing activity in marketing, we can measure that. We can measure cost and time and then put that as a number together. And so what you could do is correlate activity number. So it could be that you spend 10 hours on your marketing a week. And then you could correlate that to the number of customers you get and the number and the revenue you get. And what you could then is almost have a conversion between activity, time spent, and number of customers you get. You can influence that activity number, because if you can see, well, if I spend more activity time, if I actually spend more hours doing marketing, I get more customers. Therefore, that gives you a really good idea of how much, what you need to do to get more customers. Because you can say, well, I want to get 25% more customers. Well, let's put 25% more time into my activity, maybe contact the agency and say you can spend more time doing what you're doing. Therefore, I've got to pay more, but I'm assuming I'm going to get more customers. You can actually run tests like that. And once you run tests like that, you'll have a very good understanding of what works, whether actually putting more activity in is going to get you more customers, or spending more on your PPC budget is going to get you more customers. Because you can influence that number, it makes such a difference. So I just thought I'd mention that. What I would recommend you do is, if you're interested in listening to my concept with a bit more knowledge about it, because it was a good few years ago now, go and search up, as my kids call it, on Google. It's called Bath Digital Festival 2019 Roundup, and it's number 47 of our Something Inventive podcast. We'll see if we can put it in the notes as well. This particular interview with Natalie starts at 15 minutes and 30, but watch the whole thing because there's good stuff in there. Okay, so just before we get into the walkthrough, why use Data Studio? Well, Data Studio is pretty cool because it allows you to combine multiple data sources into one place. So you're not having to go into Google Analytics, hop over to Search Console, dive into YouTube, or go into your Google Ads dashboard. And going to Google Ads, frankly, just fills me with dread because I've got to wait for it to load and sort of drill through all the data. So I would much rather bring it all into one place where I can just look at the numbers that mean something to me. You can also get scheduled reports as well, which I'll show you at the end of the walkthrough. So let's dive into that now. Make sure I've got everything up on screen. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so you should be seeing at the moment a Data Studio sales page, I guess you'd call it. Your data is beautiful, use it. So I'll say from the outset, Data Studio is free. You don't need to pay for it. I'd imagine the reason Google is interested in Data Studio is they probably use it for themselves, but they also want, Google likes data. So the more data they can get and suck in and play with, the better. So I'm just going to move on and just go through a little bit of a walkthrough, giving you a few examples of how it could work for you. The first place, if you're new to Data Studio, the first place to go really is to have a look at their template gallery. It's a good place to start because they will have default templates set up for things like analytics, Google Ads. They'll even have YouTube in there. And you can go and say, have a look at the YouTube analytics dashboard and go and see how they make up the data. Go and see how they design it. Go and see how they, what sort of visualizations they think are important. But if you see, just glancing at a lot of these, they are just packed with data. And for me, that's overwhelming. For some people, they may love this, but for me, and for a lot of customers, I find having a packed dashboard is just completely overwhelming. And we don't need all of those numbers all of the time. Actually, if I want to get some detail on YouTube, I would rather go into the YouTube analytics and look at it there. What I want to know from YouTube is how many subscribers I've got. Maybe are those subscribers increasing? Are we doing a good job there? But I would start with the templates because it's a really good place to just see what other people are doing or see what Google have set up. But let me show you a few basics first. Oh, yeah, something I forgot to say there is you can copy and paste the charts and the scorecards and the data from these templates. So even if you're making your own, you can call up some of these templates and copy and paste them into your own template, which is going to make it a lot easier to get you started. But let's get started. So the reason I'm not taking it all the way through is because it kind of exposes a lot of other client data, which I don't really want to show you, and I shouldn't show you from a GDPR perspective. So I'm just kind of going to jump around to specific elements that I've set up. But essentially, once you have signed into Data Studio, which you can do by having a Google account, it may go through setting up some data sources for you. You're going to jump into a view a bit like this, which is you can't really see it all on the screen, but it's basically showing you what looks like a kind of a landscape report, blank piece of paper almost. And the first thing we need to do is start adding some data onto this. Otherwise, really, we've got nothing to look at. So if I click on Add Data, it comes up with a little slide over, and we've got lots of different things that I can add into this data. So we've got Google Analytics, ads, we've got Google Sheets. Google Sheets is interesting. I'll try and remember to come back to that one. We've also got Search Console. We can connect to MySQL databases. So if you're running a database with your own data in it, you can pull from there. YouTube Analytics. There are lots of other separate external connectors as well to connect to things like Twitter, Facebook, and other data sources. You might have to pay for those. I don't tend to use them because I just want to keep my data sort quite simple at the moment. But you might want to experiment having a look through these and seeing if there's any free data add-ons that you can get. But I will just pull out Google Sheets. Google Sheets, if any of you have used it, it's a really quite simple interactive spreadsheet that you can share with other people online. And we've used it for many of our customers to allow them to import their own data. So if they've got a customer relationship management package, a CRM, or maybe they've got their account system, they can copy and paste data from that and paste it into a table in Google Sheets. Once it's in there, we can treat that like a data source. So we can actually query it and mix it with our other data. You can do some complicated things with that, which are very useful. So we've used it in a simple way to set targets for a particular dashboard and allow us to put in specific targets that we want to meet, all the way through to connecting up with like really powerful CRM packages and pulling through lots of data and then blending that data together with various analytics data or other spreadsheets to give quite interesting KPIs. But we're not going to show you that today. That gets a bit complex and is way out of the scope of this. So what we'll do is I've already got a sample Google Analytics added. So I'm just going to cancel this. We can see that we've already got this data added up there. So what we'll do is I'm going to click on and add a chart first. So I click on add a chart here. There's lots of different types. We've got tables which have these colored bars, and the colored bars will represent different levels of things, like the higher a number, the darker the color. We've got these scorecards, which I showed you an example of. We've got things over time, bar charts, like you saw in my example previously. We've got maps, pie charts. I do love a good pie chart. It's a nice way to see splits between things. And things like pivot tables, I don't actually understand pivot tables. They're one of those mythical things in Excel that only some people know how to work. I haven't got to grips with those yet. Tree maps can also be quite useful. They are an interesting way of visually comparing data. So what you might have is, for example, you might have different traffic sources with the second number you're going to look at is the goals per traffic source. And what that will do then is it will create the different boxes for each source and size them depending on how many goals you had for it. So it means that at a glance, you can see if this box is bigger, it's had more goals. You might say, oh, we've got lots of CPC goals, which means a lot of people have come through on paid traffic. It's quite an interesting way. I'm not going to show you one of those because it's just a bit more complicated to set up, but it's quite interesting. What I'm going to do is we'll just start off, I think, with, let me see what I've got here. It's not actually scrolling for me. I want to go back to the top. There we go. We'll start off with a simple table. So I'll click on that and then I'll drag it to where I want. And it's going to try and do its best job to pull in data based on what I've already got connected. So I've got Google Analytics connected and it's pulled in this. And in this data sample, we can see it's got the page title and the number of new users to that page. Well, that's not really useful to us. So I want to change that just to users because I want to know how many people visited that page. So on the right-hand side, I've got this sidebar, and this is where I can interact with the data. So I can click on available fields and type in users. And then I've got my number here, users. And what I can do is I can just drag it onto the metric, new users. Now I can either add it as a separate column, or I can just drag it over the top of the one that was there previously and it will replace it. So it's done that. So now we can see the page title and how many users they had. You'll notice there's no time period on this. We'll come back to that. There's actually set a time period so you can see how that works. I will actually show you later. So there's that. And what else we add? Oh, I know. Let's see how many people actually came in on that page. If I can spell it correctly. There we go. So what I can do is click on that and drag it. And I want to drag that underneath users. And we see that adds it as a separate column. There we go. So just looking at this data now, we can see that the home page had overall about 31,000 visitors. Of those 31,000, it had 21,500 people who came in it. That's the page they entered the site on. So that's quite interesting. It might give you an idea of which are your which are the pages which are actually your sort of landing pages that are bringing people in. Okay, so let's, I don't like the term users. I'm going to change that and make it visitors because that makes more sense to me. So what I can do is on the metric, I can actually hover over the bit that says auto or aught and click on a pencil. If I click on a pencil, I get lots of different options. I'm not really going to dive too much into the options because there's lots of different things there, but you can change how the numbers display, particularly if it's a currency or a date. So in users, I'm going to change that to visitors. You can see it's changed it in the table. So that's handy. And maybe I only want to show the top 5 pages. So let me click on that table, scroll down, and we'll change rows per page to 5. Because maybe I only want to see the top 5 pages ever. So why show me all that other data? Let's get rid of that. What we'll also do is just move these columns around, neaten it up a little bit. That looks good. Yeah, I'm happy with that. We can also, if we want, we've got this little arrow here, so we can scroll through page by page. So all the data's still there, but it's only showing me 5 at a time. Right, let's add something else. Let's add a scorecard in. So let's go to add a chart, and we'll go to scorecard. And I'm going to drop that to the side here. So scorecards are nice because they just show one metric. Very easy to work out. And I am going to, what shall I add in there? Goal completions, that's what I'll do. So I want to know how many goals that we have got on the site. So if I type in goal completions, and that's the total amount of goals, all goals. You can actually, if you've got specific goals like purchases or contact form fills, you can specify those directly. But as I said, this data is just sort of general sample data in Google. So the goals aren't really labeled. So I can just drag that over and then drag it over the top of users. That's good. But again, goal completions, I want to change that to a simpler name. I'm just going to put goals, or goalers, as I type there, goals. Brilliant. I mean, you could even type if you want sales, because that might mean something more to, you know, if this sheet is going out to multiple people in your company, then you might want to make that data relevant to terms they already use. Okay, that's good. I mean, you can just continue adding charts like that building things up. You can add, if we wanted to add other charts, which I'll show you in a minute, you can just click on them, drag them in, and then play around with the data. It works quite well. You can also change them, a chart. So if you've added a chart, you want to change what it is, you can click on it. And then if you see this bit at the top where it says chart scorecard, I can click on that, and then I can actually change the chart to a different type. Sometimes you might find that if you do that and you change the chart to a different type, it's going to end up with an error. I'm going to see if I can do that for you. Let's see, something like this, scatter graph. Probably going to work now, but sometimes because it doesn't have enough data, it comes up with an error because you need to actually add more metrics in. So often I find, yeah, see, that doesn't really make so much sense. Often I find it's better to just add a new chart and customize it from there. You can also undo, which is very, very handy. And as I said before, you can also copy and paste. So if I click on this, I can just copy that and move it around. It's got some nice lining up features. You can see that it gives you ideas on where, if you're lining up the center of various objects. It does also have a grid, which you can customize. So I can move things around in the grid to, if you're like me and particular about where things sit, then you can line it up like that. So one thing I said that this didn't have was any time control. We're looking at this, we have no idea what date period this data is ranging over. So we can do that in controls. And there's lots of controls here. I'm just going to look at the date range control one for the moment. So let's put this in. I'm just put it in the middle of the screen here. And we can set the date range to be a variety of different things, from the last 7 days, last 30 days, just today. We can say a typical one I use is last month. So for a lot of the dashboards I produce that come out monthly, we want to look at last month. So let's have a look at that one. So now it's set the date range for this form to be the 1st of May to the 31st of May. And so all of the data is relevant to that. If I were to actually change that and look at the last quarter, all of the data changes. It goes up because it's now recording the last quarter. One thing to note is we're in edit mode. If I click on view mode, it simplifies everything. So we now look like we're using a report, and I can actually just click on this date range here. So what you can do is you can set your report to have a default date period, but then people can go in and change it if they want. So if you're maybe having a chat with someone like I do, I'll bring up the report, but we actually want to look at it over a longer period, you can do that. Let's go back into edit mode. There's also lots of other things you can do. You can actually embed websites in there. Maybe you've got data coming from somewhere else. You can have a little iframe embedded on here. You can put images on. You can put text boxes on to give labels for things and titles, lines, colors, shapes, and lots of things you can do. I think probably the easiest way of me showing you a bit more that it can do is to take you to an example dashboard of one that we sort of typically use with coaching clients. And that's here. So this is a sort of newer marketing dashboard that we've developed. Is it this year or last year? I can't remember, more recently, because we did have quite a good dashboard, but it had multiple pages on it, lots of data, and even I felt that it was a bit too much. So what I've done is started off by having one page dashboard with some core information on it, which we can then tweak and customize to clients. And then if they want, we can add more pages to that. You will notice for the eagle-eyed out of you, there are 2 pages on this. I will come back to that one in a minute. So this marketing dashboard, I'm just going to go through and make a few tweaks to this because it's looking a bit dull, not quite showing me the data I want. At the moment, the little line graph here is not showing me much information at all. In fact, it's just showing me data for this particular month. I actually want this chart to show me data for the whole year, whereas I want everything else to respond to my little data controller at the top here. So for this, what I do is click on the graph and scroll down. Let's find it. I gotta find it now. Date range, here we go. So default date range is on auto, which means it's going to take the date control on screen if there is one. I can click on custom. And with custom, I can then select this year. And now in doing that, I've then got the line showing the data for this whole year, which is awesome. It's coming very similar to that example I showed you. So that's great. But I also want goals on there because I want to see the correlation between visits and goals. So on the data on the right-hand side, let me click on that and I will type goals. Goal completion, sorry, is what it's called. Sorry, I need to select this. There we go. And then I can drag goal completions just under visitors, and it's going to be a second metric. Now, the way the style of this chart works is you have one line graph and then bar charts. I think you can add more metrics on and it'll add more differently colored bar charts. So that's good. I'm going to also change this to goals, but just because goal completions is too long. In fact, no, we're using sales, aren't we? There we go. So I can see the number of sales. And you can actually, if you want, if you've got an e-commerce website, you can actually not use goals. You can use the e-commerce transaction data. So I could actually change goals to transactions. So I could change that and then it becomes true sales because it's actually showing how many e-commerce transactions actually happened on the site rather than just my goals that I've set up. So that might be a better metric then. That's looking a bit better, isn't it? I like that. If you want, you can then put the comparison data on. So I might want to compare that against the previous period. So just underneath the date range, I can click comparison. And we want it to be, well, you've got lots of different things. You've got previous year, you've got previous period, which means if you're selecting a month, it'll show you the previous month. If you wanted previous year, but you're only selecting a month and you wanted to see the prior year, then you'd select previous year. In this case, I could actually select previous period because that's going to be the last year as well, or previous year. I'll go with previous year. And now I can see last year's data as well as this year's data. And I can see that generally traffic is up. Transactions are broadly up, although they were down in, really up in February. So what happened in February? Did we have a big marketing push or something like that? Again, this is sample data, so I don't really know exactly what it means. Okay, let's move on to these scorecards. So I've got a little collection of scorecards sat here just to give quick metrics. You'll notice that I do try and add little labels to show where the data comes from. So this is a data label I've left on here and it says data is compared to the previous period, YouTube subs, YouTube subscriptions is the total. So it's just trying to give a little idea about where this data is coming from, what it means. I've also done something up under here, say data is from GA, Google Analytics, GSC, Google Search Console, and YouTube. So in these scorecards, I do like a bit of comparison data. So I'm going to multi-select these by holding down on a Mac. You hold down Command. I think it's Control on a PC. Hold down all of those. And then so comparison date range, we want to be previous period in this example. There we go. That's great. Now, one of those looks a bit odd. Add cost per conversion. So that's a good number. I want to know how much it costs me for the conversions I get. That's my acquisition cost. But the number is going down, but yet it's in red. Now, red normally means bad, but it's good. If the cost is coming down per conversion, that's a good thing. So that should be green. Let's change that to green. So if I click on it, I can then go into this tab called Style. And in the Style, it's actually got these the wrong way around. Now, that's not its fault. It doesn't necessarily always know exactly whether up is good or up is bad. So in this case, down is definitely good. So I'm going to change down to green and then up to be red. That's better. So now at a glance, I can look at that cost, but I can also know it's going down. And so I don't need to think about it. So that's good. What else can we do? Oh, we need to tidy up the user's title here. Again, users, I mean, they're not users, they're visitors. We could also call them site visits. And that helps me more specifically know what that number is. I know that's the number of visits to this site within that date period. Yeah, that's better. That's all I've got on my notes here for that. What else did I want to change? We've got this lovely pie chart. So what this is doing is it's looking at the social activity, or sorry, what it's looking at is the social sources. So it's looking at where traffic comes into the website and where it's filtered by social platform. And then it's showing that in a pie chart. So we can see in this case that LinkedIn has a higher percentage than Facebook. So either we're doing more on LinkedIn or LinkedIn is working better for us. But I don't like it. I like colors. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to change the style of it. So I'm going to change the style to, it's showing slice color. You've got slice order. So it can actually change the colors and you can then tweak them here. You can then even change the color by the value. But I like slice order because then it's always consistent. That's better. You can also change the value shown. I've got percentages, but you can change that to the actual value. You can see here it's 9, but it's often easier to show a percentage because again, 9 doesn't necessarily mean anything, but from this graph, what I want to see is what is the rough percentage of that? How has it improved? We've also got a little map. This map is showing the visits by city. You could also show where the top transactions happen. But let's customize this a little bit and actually zoom in on some of the data we're interested in. Maybe we do get traffic all over the world, but we're particularly interested in stuff in the UK. So let me change that. I'm going to click on this. I'm going to click on the geo dimension just to focus on city. Because it was looking at country. So basically it's sort of bringing all of the data together and looking on a country by country basis, which means it colors the whole country. But I want to look at it on a city by city basis. So that's useful. But you know, the UK is tiny, so we can hardly see it. So we can't really see which cities things are in, where they're getting the most traffic. So what I'm going to do is change the zoom area. I think they've changed this recently, so I had to make a note. Yeah, it's just to Europe now. You were able to zoom right into the UK. If I go to Europe, then we can see the whole of Europe, and then we can actually see dots in all the different cities where we're getting traffic. Again, you can customize that. I've customized it to be red dots, but you can change the color of those dots, and the size of them will change depending on the number of users. Okay, that's enough customization there. Let's move on to this default channel grouping. That's very formal, isn't it? I think we'll change the name of that to traffic sources. Default channel grouping is the data it's using. It's the number it's using to, not the number, sorry, it's the label of the information. I'm going to change that to sources. So that gives us a bit more information. It tells us where traffic is coming from. What else can we do there? Maybe what would be really useful is to see how many transactions we had, or how many goals, let's call it goals, how many goals we had for each of those traffic sources. Because then at a glance, I can not only see how many visitors come in, but how many goals I had. So we clicked on that. Let me put goals in here. Sorry, just goal completions. And I'm going to drag that in under visitors, and that adds a second column. So now we can see the number of goal completions in there as well. And just because it's too long, I'm going to name this to goals. So that's quite handy. And in the final section just below, this is an area I find particularly interesting actually. So all of the data above here is all coming from Google Analytics in the main, except YouTube subscriptions. So this is actually data sourced from YouTube, and it's basically it's looking at all YouTube subscriptions. In fact, see if I can see them exactly what the metric is. It's actually looking at the total, and I made this as a calculation. So for those of you who fancy doing this, you can actually go in and mix multiple bits of data together and add them and subtract them. So I'm actually summing up the total amount of user subscriptions that have been added over whatever time period, minusing the number have been removed, because it doesn't actually give you the total at the moment. It just says how many have been added, how many have been removed. I need to add all those up. And then I need to say, do it over the entire period. So I'm basically saying running over a custom time period of whatever today's date is minus 10 years. So basically the full, you can't actually say everything. You just got to say this a massive time range. And then that will give us the total amount of subscribers we've got. That saves us going into YouTube to find that data out. So that's all to say that all of this data is coming from Google Analytics, except this bit down the bottom, which is coming from Search Console. So for those of you who know, Search Console will give you information about what people are doing on Google, what they're searching for, how many people actually might see your site, how many people click through, and what keyword position you are. Really useful data. But we can see it's got lots of information here at the moment, too much. It's basically showing every keyword search. I only want to show certain keywords. So what I'm going to do, no, not click on that. What I'm going to do is select the table, and I'm going to add a filter to that to only show information that I want to see. Now, as any good Blue Peter presenter would do, they would have something prepared in advance. So I've got the keywords here, and I'm going to add them. When I add them on, it's now only showing me the keywords I'm interested in. Again, this data is meaningless to me, so I picked a few: YouTube merch, Google hats, and Google bike, because they're the ones I want to see what position we are and how many impressions we get, how many times we're shown in Google search, and how many clicks. I will just give you a quick sneak peek of how that filter works, but it's really powerful. There's lots you can do in it. If I click on the pencil icon for keywords, it brings the filter up. And I can see, we can give it a name. We can say where the data comes from. And then we've got, do we want to include or exclude the data? So I want to include only queries, but I could select other bits of data here that equal this. And then for every keyword I want to add, I just add another or in. So if I click or, I can then include query. If I can actually click query, there we go, query equals, and then I actually type the keyword I want to follow. So let's put in just Google, see if anyone's searching for that. There we go. I mean, now we can see how many people are actually searching for Google, what position you come up with in, and how many impressions and clicks. Really useful keyword filters you can use on any of these charts. It's very useful. Finally, let's go up and have a look at the data controller. And what I'll do is I'll put us into view mode for this. So we look at the data controller at the top, or the data controller, sorry, and click on that. And then we can look at all of this data over the last quarter. So now everything changes apart from YouTube subscribers, which is over the whole year anyway. That's quite fun. Just very quickly, I'll show you how to share. So if we click on share at the top, we can just give access to other people. We can just pop their email in. As long as they've got a Google account, you can select them. You can give them permission to view only, or they can edit it as well. But the area I really like is scheduling. So if I click on the drop-down arrow and click schedule email delivery, then I can actually get this report delivered to me every single month. So I need to select repeat custom. And then I want to select start day on the first, any first of the month. And then you can select this to repeat every month on the first day. So now if I schedule that, I'm going to get this report coming through to my email on the 1st of July. And so I don't even need to go and look at this dashboard. It comes to me. You can obviously change that to be weekly, daily if you want to look at your data that often. I recommend you don't. Probably weekly is enough. You can also share it with other people. So if you're managing this on behalf of someone else, you can get that report sent to them. That's going to save you some time. So that's really cool. So this dashboard, if you want, I won't make this dashboard available, but I will make a dashboard available in the notes where you can use that as an example one, and you can then make a copy of that for yourself and use that as your starter dashboard if you want to do that. Obviously, if you're a coaching client, don't worry about that. I'll do it all for you. But anyone else, you can certainly use ours to begin with. One thing I'll finally show you, and it's something I've started recently including on these dashboards, is content ideas. So every time this report comes through, there's a second page, and it's pulling data from Google Search Console about what questions people are asking on Google where your site comes up. And the useful thing about this, and certainly Chris Richards gave us this idea when he was reviewing our club site a few months ago now, he gave us this idea of creating this search. And so this is really useful for people when, not only when this comes through, they can share it with people who are writing the copy, or if they want to create ideas for videos, you can look through this and find something that's interesting. What I've also created, if you want something which is just content ideas, and I've created it just for you folks, is a dedicated content ideas sheet, Data Studio sheet, which you can use. And anyone can use this. It's if you were to log into Data Studio under an account that has a Google Search Console account connected to it, then you will be able to select it in this little drop down. So you can see I've selected my domain here, ratherinventive.com, and we can see that it's giving me all of the questions that people are asking where our site's coming up. And so we can see this might be quite useful to write about how to manage a WordPress website, because we can see that there are impressions for it, but our position's poor. It's position 61. If we want to become higher up, we might actually want to start writing content about that, which we haven't got that specific keyword. So it might be something good to look at. How to manage my WordPress site, very relevant. How to get better at marketing. That's actually something we are starting to work on. So that might be being pulled in because we are starting to talk about it. So it gives you really good ideas about stuff you could write about. The key thing is that you have to have enough visits to start generating this data. Otherwise it's not, or enough, you have to start appearing enough Google searches to start this data coming in. So it's very difficult for new sites to have anything here to begin with. So maybe give it a couple of months, maybe get some visits to your site, get some, do a bit of SEO to begin with, and then you'll start generating this data. But this is completely free. So I'll make sure that we get this link in the notes for this webinar. And then all you need to do is click on the link. You don't need to copy it. You don't need to duplicate it unless you want to. All you do is just make sure you're logged in with the same account as your Search Console, and then you can select it in the drop down and it will give you results that's specific to you. Right, finally, let me just switch back to the presentation. I think I just mentioned, actually, yeah, I've got the links here, so we'll make sure they're included for both the marketing dashboard, which you can use as a starter, or the content ideas, which I think is pretty cool. And I'd love to make it a bit more open and access on for club members on the website, but it'll stay in Data Studio for the moment. But that's it, really. That's everything I've got to share on Data Studio. If you've got any questions on it, do get in touch with us. Obviously, anyone in coaching, if you want to find out more, do ask me. I'm happy to go through and sort of add more metrics and data into your dashboard. Just want to come back to what I said at the beginning and why I think it's relevant. We only want to add data that is meaningful to us, something that we can impact, something that's going to raise questions. Why is this happening? Why is that like that? Because otherwise, if we're looking at data and we're getting confused by it, or it's not showing us anything that's useful, let's get rid of it. Let's try and keep that dashboard as clean as possible. So that's the end of that. Claire, let's stop sharing, maybe come back to you. What have we got on for next week?
So next week we're back to opening the club up and inviting to
yes, that's right.
To have their websites reviewed. So that's always interesting. So yeah, definitely join us for that. And then at the end of the month, we're joined by Libby Windle, who's a Google Ads expert and somebody that we've been working with recently. But she's going to sort of run through a Google Ads campaign and how you set it up, and share some really sort of meaningful tips and advice on how to get the most out of that. So
yeah, Lib is great. I think that's going to be really good, actually. She's got some good advice on running that. Thanks, Claire. So for now, it's time. We've hit our hour. So thank you very much. We're here every Friday at 10 a.m. unless it's a bank holiday or special jubilee like it was last time. We cover everything in marketing, from strategy, social, SEO, video, and more. Tons of stuff. If you've got anything you want us to talk about, do let us know. We did put out a survey recently. It seems like we are covering the right topics, but I always want to know if there's something that we aren't covering deeply enough for you. Let me know. Email support@ratherinventive.com. As I said, we're here every week, but if you can't come every week, I know it's a big time commitment, you can share the link with a friend and they can come on as our guest. Just let us know in advance so we can welcome them. And don't forget, you can catch up with all the previous webinars on Basecamp and on our website as we start moving people over to that. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.